bread. We posted the recipe a little bit earlier this week, so you should have it. If you don't have it, it's quite easy. It's honestly about 4 to 5 ingredients. So we'll just get started. In the recipe, it does call for caster sugar. If you don't have that, then that is totally fine. You can use a food processor or a blender or a coffee grinder to just break down your white sugar. So basically what we're doing is we're making a super fine sugar. So not powdered, but a little bit finer sugar so that it doesn't have a crunch because we're not creaming our sugar and our butter together. So it's not gonna break down the sugar crystal. So that's the only reason why we're going for a super fine sugar. So it costs a little bit more in the store when you can just quickly make your own. So we're just putting our sugar in the blender, okay? And we're just gonna pulse, okay? Gonna pulse it a couple times. All right, so that should be pretty good. So I'll just kind of show you a little bit here on just on my fingers. It's a little bit finer. If you're feeling it, you won't get that that granular feel. Okay. So no need to buy it at the store. You can just quickly make your own. Okay. So we're gonna do this all in the food processor tonight. This couldn't be easier. Let me just plug in. Okay, put the lid over here. If you don't have a food processor, that's okay. You can do it all by hand. All right, so we're gonna put in our half a cup of sugar. And then we've got half a teaspoon of salt. And we're gonna put in 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So don't forget here just to mix up your flour a little bit, just aerate it a little bit so that you get a proper measurement. Okay. Okay, so 2 scoops. All right. That can go away. Now we are using unsalted butter. So the reason we're using the unsalted butter is because we put our salt into the sugar and flour mixture. If you are going to use salted butter, then just decrease your salt that you're putting in your mixture by half, okay? And because this recipe only has very limited amounts of ingredients, we're going to try to use the best butter you can find, okay? A nice creamy churn butter. I like Lactantia myself. Okay, so we've just got this in some little pieces here. I'm just gonna wipe my hands. Okay, and then does everyone have their oven to 350 degrees? Okay. Just put this on here, and then we're just gonna pulse.
Had a little question there from Grace and Scarlett. I think if you've got standard butter, 2 sticks is half a pound.
You got it. Good question, girls.
Thanks, Julian. This is as good a time as any, I guess, to introduce Julian as well. So Julian is our local Oakville Museum supervisor. So Julian is joining us today while Laura is using really high technology tools to prepare shortbread this evening. Julian from the Oakville Museum was kind enough to agree to come in and show us some ancient artifacts, or Oakville artifacts, I guess not so ancient, but Oakville artifacts of how folks would prepare food many, many years ago. I don't know if this is a good time for us to lean to you, Julian. You tell me.
Well, I defer to the chef. So you let me know, chef, you let me know when I can start. I can start whenever.
Oh, thanks, Julian. Let me finish with the food processor so people can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 sec. Okay, so when you are putting this in your food processor, you don't want it to form a ball, okay? So we want it to be still pretty crumbly. I'm just gonna go for another few seconds here. Okay. So I'll just give you guys a look so you can see. So you guys can see how it's still pretty crumbly mix. Okay.
So Chef Laura, if someone doesn't have a food processor, is this something that you could use your blender for, or a hand blender, or do we really need the food processor this time?
You don't need to use it. It's quick and convenient, but you can always do it by hand.
And then I believe this would be a good time to tie in Julian, because I would imagine that many years ago there was not food processors and they were preparing things by hand.
Well, it depends on how far back you go. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Caroline Cross, who's our curator at the Oakville Museum. And she very kindly pulled a number of artifacts for me to talk about. And I'm joining you live from our collection storage here at the Queen Elizabeth Park Community and Cultural Center. I'm actually literally just around the corner from Chef Laura in the kitchen. So conveniently located if anything goes wrong, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, historically, no food processors. They did have other labor-saving devices. When I worked in historic kitchens, we either used a pastry cutter or a couple of knives. Chef?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work, right? I think.
Absolutely.
Definitely use the knife method. Still use it at home when I can't find my pastry cutter. But I do have a few things here that kind of go into the ingredients part. And I wish I had some sugar stuff, because that's really interesting. If I realized that our chef was going to process the sugar, I could have brought some stuff out for that. But I'm going to jump ahead to another ingredient. And so my first mystery object of the day is this thing right here. And I wonder if anybody can guess what you might want to use this for.
Looks like a ping pong paddle.
It does kind of, doesn't it? It looks like well, it is kind of an oddly shaped wooden spoon. So any takers? It relates directly to one of our ingredients.
I know.
All right, well, go ahead.
It's a butter paddle.
It is. It's totally a butter paddle. So back in the day, you could buy butter, of course, but maybe if you were out on a farm, you didn't have to buy butter because you had cows. You could milk the cows, let the cream rise to the top, skim off the cream, churn the cream into butter. It's not that hard. If you're like me and you sometimes go too far with the whipped cream, you've already made butter, right? That's the thing. What you would do when you got to the point when you've churned your butter, you actually have a mixture of butter and buttermilk. And typically what you do is you'd have that in a big wooden bowl. You put your mixture into the bowl and you use a couple of these butter paddles to kind of squish the buttermilk out of the butter. And then you would actually take the butter on your butter paddle and you would put it into my second mystery object, this thing right here. And if you can see how it works, you can see it has this kind of like whole kind of piston action thing going on here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. When would these tools have been used?
Oh, these would have been used like 19th century, early 20th century until like, yeah, I mean, definitely 100 years ago, they were still using these. Anyone who was making their own butter or, again, who couldn't couldn't get to, or couldn't be, or like if you were farming and you had your own cows, you wouldn't necessarily bother going to buy it. You could just make it. This is just a butter mold, and they came in lots of different kinds of, well, this is a pretty common size and shape for it because it's about a pound. So you squish your butter into the butter mold, and basically you let it, you put it somewhere fairly cool, and then when you push it out again, you've got a nice pound of butter.
Block of butter. So Chef Laura, what should folks be working on now as they're learning about making their home butter?
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly get mine into the oven just so I can show people how to cut once it comes out of the oven. So what happens when you take it off your food processor, or if you are mixing by hand, it should still be fairly crumbly. So what you're going to do then is you're going to put it in an 8x8 pan or a 9x9 pan. Or if you wanted to use a round cake pan, you can certainly do that. Just make sure it's very well buttered. I sometimes will put a piece of parchment paper on the bottom. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to press your dough into your pan. It's going to be a little bit lumpy looking on the top, and that's totally fine. So just give it a good press, and then you'll put it in the oven at 350 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes until it's browned. Some people like to decorate with the tines of a fork. So you can actually prick your shortbread before it goes in the oven or after it comes out. So there's no right or wrong way to do that. Some people like to pre-mark lines, but I find it cuts perfectly fine, just coming out of the oven and after it usually cools.
Julian, it looked like you had your hand up, sir.
I do, because that's a perfect segue for another object that I have, which is actually one of my favorites. So I'll see if the camera can get a good shot of it here. Can you guys see that? This is pretty cool. So you can see it's kind of like this round disky shaped thing with a little handle. And then it's got this cool pattern on the inside. Let me see if I can get it right side up. There we go. So this is for exactly what Chef Laura is talking about, right? You basically, it's like a print. So if you're making a nice round pat of shortcake, you make this to make a print in it, and it will give it that pattern, right? And this is great content for us here at the museum because, Scottish shortbread has an association with Scotland. The thistle is an emblem of Scotland. The Chisholm family, who were the family that owned the building that the museum is now in, were Scottish. So there's all these connections, right? This actually, you could use it for shortbread, but it was probably used more for butter. So you would actually imprint your butter with your family emblem if that's what you had.
Cool. I see a question in the chat from Grace and Scarlett. Should we add a bit more butter if ours is too crumbly?
Nope. If it's still a little bit too crumbly, then mix it a little bit more on your food processor.
Okay. So just so I'm playing catch up, because I know some of the folks might not have been able to see what you were doing with the pan as Julian was going through some of those tools. So essentially from food processor to pan, finger pat down.
Correct.
And then what was the depth of about how deep you're looking to make that shortbread?
Oh, it's maybe about an inch or so.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then into the oven.
So make sure if you're not using a parchment paper, make sure that it's heavily buttered. Okay. So when it cools, that's the best time to take it out of the pan. And then you'll just invert the pan over, and then you can cut into your wedges or your slices. But just make sure that you butter your pan really, really well.
Very cool. Okay, well, Julian, if there's others, this would be a great time if others have any other questions that they wanted to ask either Chef Laura or Julian. Julian, I guess I'll start it off. So the items that you've shown us today, where did we acquire those? Like, do we know?
That is a good question. I actually don't have Carolyn's cheat sheet that she gave me in front of me. However, I did talk to her about them, and they are not. We don't really have good provenance on them. Provenance is the fancy museum word for saying we know exactly where they came from. And these ones we actually don't. And some of them I think are actually education collection items, which means we probably even know less about them because we tend to use objects that we don't have provenance on, we don't consider quite as precious. And so we don't mind if we take them out and use them and handle them and kind of play with them a little bit more. But so I can't tell you exactly where these come from. I can tell you that they're very typical to the most of these are late 19th, early 20th century. They're probably fairly local. Some of them, like the butter pat, is the kind of thing that someone might make for themselves. And certainly even the butter mold or the butter paddle is the kind of thing that typically was homemade. But some of the other things I have here to show, could have been made locally originally, but then tended, especially into the 20th century, tended to become mass produced. So I actually have one for, if I have a minute, I have one to show Chef Laura, that I'd like her to talk about, because I think she can probably guess what this is. If I hold it up.
Are you asking me what my guess is?
Yeah, you're the mystery guesser on this.
I have two of those.
Uh-huh.
It's a flour sifter.
Right, and so why, I think you already referred to something around this earlier. Why would you want to sift your flour? Because most of the flour we get these days is pre-sifted, if I'm not wrong.
It is, but what happens over time is that the flour compresses in the bag. So if you were to open up your bag of flour and then do a scoop, it actually wouldn't be a representative amount in your cup. It wouldn't represent the same amount in your cup as what it should be, because the flour is already compressed. So the reason that we sift flour or aerate flour is that so you actually get an accurate measure.
Absolutely. I really like this one. Can you see this one has the little wheel of bars inside it?
Yeah.
Do you have the same kind?
I do.
Yeah, that's great. Usually
honestly,
I see are the ones that have the handle you kind of pump and it has a bar that goes back and forth. But I really
have
like
two,
the kind of funky wheel one.
One I have actually was my grandmother's, and I have another one.
The same vintage as this one then. That's
looks exactly the same.
That's pretty cool.
And I use one for almond flour and one for regular flour.
Well, and so back in the day, the sifter, because the flour wasn't necessarily as evenly ground as we get, and it wasn't bagged as well. Back in the day, it was even more important because you want to get out lumps or foreign objects or whatever might be in the flour. You want to get that out before it goes into your shortbread.
And Julian, do you know in Oakville, was there a lot of farmers that grew wheat for flour?
Yeah, in fact, right from the get-go, that was one of the first industries here. So when William Chisholm got his operation going along the 16-mile creek, which is was the thing that went down the middle of Oakville at the time, one of the first things he did was started building a mill. And so he had a timber mill and a flour mill down by the creek. That was one of his first industries.
Oh, wow. Oh, good to know.
Yeah, and shipping timber and flour and grain was it was kind of Oakville's original business.
Okay,
cool.
If I have a minute, I have a couple more things. I mean, you'll just have to stop me.
So Chef Laura, is there anything that folks need to be doing, or is this baking time right now?
We are strictly in baking time.
Okay, Julian, it's yours.
So I have this little tin scoop for scooping flour, and it's just adorable. That's why I'm showing it to you. But it would do the same thing as that's probably a little earlier. It would do the same thing as any of these. And I really like this because they're kind of exactly the same thing as we have now, right? Mm-hmm. There's these nested measuring cups. And these are actually, it's actually quite an ergonomic design. Like they're really kind of ahead of their time in terms of how they're just stamped out and rolled out of a piece of tin. So, I mean, they were at their time very inexpensive. And I think you can probably still get tin measuring cups today, but they do take a little bit more maintenance. So, plastic is easier. Honestly.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah.
But these are really like aesthetically, they're like really cool.
So for folks that are just coming into our presentation now for the love of cooking with Chef Laura Strath, so our shortbread is in and baking, and we have Julian from Oakville Museum going through some local artifacts or Oakville artifacts and from baking. I just want to, I'm allowing some people to come in, Julian. I want to make sure they know what we're seeing.
Great, yeah. If you just come in and I'm just going on about stuff, they're gonna.
Please do.
Who is this guy? What's he talking about? An alternate to baking your shortbread in a pan might be to bake cookies. And to bake cookies, you might want to have one of these guys. You can just see that.
A stamp.
Again, could have been made by your local tinsmith. Has a lovely little kind of crenulated, fluted, whatever you call it, zigzaggy edge to it. And I have this, I like this little hat, very handy little strap handle, so you can punch it into the dough and pull it out again.
Mhm.
So that, again, just like very nice size cookie. And then even smaller, and like maybe for a special someone, we have this one here.
So it seems like baking tools have not evolved as much as I was expecting.
No, I think that's probably fair to say, right? Couple other, just to give you an idea of like why you might want to be grateful that you're not living in the 19th century, because this is a large bowl and it's very heavy. So these days you'd be dealing with, like, this is I think it's called a redware bowl. It's a red bodied clay that's glazed. That's where it gets its name from. And this is quite a big one. I mean, you might use this one for if you're mixing a really big cake. I hate to see the size shortbread loaf you get out of this one.
Yeah.
Or you might use it for storage and cover it with something, but just gives you an idea about what you were up against if you had to move a lot of stuff around the kitchen back in the day. Yeah, you definitely build your biceps up. And then I snuck this out, and hopefully Carolyn doesn't come after me because she doesn't know that I took it out of storage, and I think it'll be okay. But once I saw your food processor come out, I wanted to sneak this one out too. So pièce de résistance here.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Tag still on it. Nice.
Yeah, someone saved the tag on this. This is amazing. This is a Sunbeam Mix Master. So how much more classic does that get?
Can we do a guess on the year of production?
You know, I will have to look that up because I literally saw it on the shelf and thought I'm going to have to grab this. Judging from the tag, if I can get a tighter shot of it for you there, I mean, just from the graphic on the tag, it's got to be 50s.
You know, it's really I just looked it up to see if I could find out the year, and they're still using the name Sunbeam Mixmaster as their.
This is amazing. So I can, in fact, someone make me look that up, because I can go and look it up in our collections management system, and we will have an acquisitions date on it for sure. And we might have a guess at least of the date of manufacture. Or maybe one of you guys is like a Sunbeam Mixmaster collector expert, and you can just let me know, because that would be awesome.
Yeah, I wish I was trying to see if I could find it ahead of anyone, but there's been quite a few models over time, and I'd hate to guess, but this looks like it's at least 1950s, if not before.
Yeah, eyeballing it, it's at least the 50s.
So it looks, so there's an image here, and it's just 1930s Sunbeam mixer, and it's looking very similar to what we're seeing.
Oh, really? So yeah, like I said, I'm absolutely not an expert on them, so I might be well off.
No, so Chef Laura, cut me off if at any point folks need to actually start paying attention to their baking. But this is something that maybe residents aren't necessarily aware of. So behind you, you'll notice that there is huge shelving and stacks of what we store as local artifacts and local pieces of history. And I think it's kind of important and really interesting for me now that I work for the town, as I kind of get access to see some of these things, is that these are actually being kept and curated by the town. So behind Julian, you see just a row J and K, but there are a lot of really, really meaningful things that we keep history of. So if people have anything that they think they've found, Julian, what do they do with it?
Oh, okay. Well, if you have something that you think has historic significance, or if you have something that you know has historic significance, particularly if you have the whole story behind it, like that provenance piece that I was talking about, then the best thing to do is to get in contact with us. Our curator, Carolyn, is super responsive to donor inquiries, and usually she'll, like it's a call, these days it's a call or an email. And we usually kind of start a conversation there. We have a very specific mandate to collect things that are as connected to Oakville as possible. And if you were able to see the full storage behind me, you would know that we're at 18,000 objects bursting at the seams. So we can't take everything, but we do. So we just necessarily have to be selective in terms of objects that we take, but we do take things. And again, we are really always looking for that Oakville story. And it doesn't have to be 200 years old. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I pulled the Mixmaster out, even though most of my artifacts are, early 20th or late to mid 19th century. We have that stuff. But, the joke I always make is to my kids, the 90s is history, right? So more recent stuff is perfectly okay as well. And we want to talk to you about that as well.
Cool.
Nice. Is everyone smelling their shortbread in the oven?
I wish I could smell it from here. I mean, I think it's far from here. Well, actually, and our storage is climate controlled, so that might be one of the reasons.
So Chef Laura, where are we in terms of the baking process now?
So they should be about halfway through. So what you're looking for in your shortbread, it will be nice and golden brown, and then it will still have residual cooking after you take it out of the oven. So that's when you have it cool. I unfortunately don't have one to show you that's already done. But what you're going to do is that you'll let it cool on a wire rack. And then once it's cooled down, you just take your paring knife and you can go around your pan, and then you can invert it to take it out of the pan. And then if you flip it back over, so I like to use just 2 cutting boards. I'll put it onto my wire rack, invert it onto my wire rack. So if this was my wire rack, and then this was my shortbread, then I would put a cutting board on top of that and then flip it back over so that your shortbread piece is already on the cutting board. And then you're ready to cut.
Huge shout out to the folks at Queen Elizabeth Park for setting us up with the overhead shot today. Oh man, that is, yeah, top innovation. So Chef Laura, staying with the shortbread. So now understanding that everyone's stoves 350 maybe is different and everyone's depth of their pan is different. So as people are starting to kind of peek into their ovens, you mentioned browning on the top. Is there any other way that they can kind of inspect and know that things are just right?
Nope, you're just waiting for a nice golden brown color.
So you got to leave it and trust the process.
Got to trust the process. So it will take a good 30 to 35 minutes.
Okay.
So
sorry?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then you can do your design once it's come out of the oven too. You can prick with the tines of your fork, or you can just leave it plain. It's also a good time to say, if you wanted to, you could also dip it in some chocolate after it's cooled, or even if you wanted to drizzle with chocolate and then add some candied ginger or some candied lemon or candied orange, that is also lovely.
I was just going to interject that, we're a bit spoiled with modern ovens, even if our 350 is off one way or the other. When you look at historic recipes, they tend to have instructions like put it into a fast oven and bake until done.
Not too much and not too little.
Well, what's a fast oven? Like, how hot is that?
Julian, what is a fast oven?
It's just means it's hot. It's relatively hot as compared to a slow oven, which is relatively cool.
Okay.
And you would just learn, like, it depends on what kind of oven you were using. Like, I've actually worked as a historic interpreter where we bake on an open hearth, and you just get a feel for it, right? And in those cases, we would use what's called a bake kettle. So it's literally a big cast iron kettle, a big pot. You put coals underneath it and coals on top, and you kind of bank the coals around it, and that's your oven.
Oh, wow.
Right? And if you need a fast oven, you use more coals. And if you need a slow oven, you use less coals. And you just like, it's kind of trial and error. You kind of figure out what works. And every big kettle is a different size. So you kind of have to know what works for that kettle. And different, different wood will give you different coal qualities and different heats, right? So it's just an experience thing.
I spent some time traveling throughout the world, and I can tell you there are still places that are still doing that, that still bake, using like the pot and coal.
Yeah. I made it sound harder than it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Once you've done it a few times, it's actually not that difficult. And you can be like, and it's fun to kind of really impress people to say, oh yes, I made the shortbread on my bake kettle. And inside you're going, it's actually not that hard.
So just a little bit more planning.
Yeah, or just you have to start the fire earlier, basically.
Yeah. So folks, as we wait for our shortbread to finish up, I want to turn our attention to next week. So obviously everyone is probably kind of getting excited, mixed excitement for the holidays coming because they don't really know what that's going to look like for them. And we were thinking a really cool activity might be, because maybe Christmas might look different for your family this year, but there's still going to be that spirit of giving. So next week we're looking at maybe doing some gifted baked items. So items that we can bake and then prepare in a gift. So if anyone has suggestions on things they might like to see us bake, or maybe even some suggestions on fancy ways to prepare a baked good, this would be an awesome time to share it, because pretty much after we finish 1 week, we already start moving on to preparing for the following week. So if anyone has any suggestions on things that we could prepare, I see chocolate bark coming in from Sheena. That's a great suggestion. Please keep them coming. Chef Laura.
Yes.
Chocolate bark. Could we task you with that?
Absolutely.
That's something you're capable of? Could we do it in a 30-minute, 45-minute show?
Yes, and I'll show you a really easy way to temper dark chocolate.
Oh, Grace and Mom just came out with the suggestion of the year.
Oh.
Gluten-free cookies that could freeze until Christmas Eve.
Okay, I can look into that.
Oh, hey, you know what? I'd settle for any gluten-free item would be fantastic. The Noon family suggests almond cookies. Oh, and Sheena says, I want that too. And Noon family says yes to the gluten-free things. So it seems like Julian's got his hand up too. Big gluten-free gang. I didn't know that I was with my people here. Thank you guys. I did not send out e-transfers to all of the families ahead of time to try and get some gluten-free cooking in here. I see my wife in here. I'm surprised she didn't suggest that. Don't really appreciate that snub, but okay.
Well, maybe Daniel, we can do maybe a gluten-free gingerbread.
Okay, gluten-free gingerbread.
Is that good?
Gluten-free
gingerbread.
Yeah.
Emphatic nods from Grace and Mom over there. So I think those all sounded fantastic for me. I was actually hoping to get a question in. It's actually a question I asked earlier to Chef Laura, because I always wondered what the short in shortbread was. I know that when I make it, people go, oh, this is really short, which seems to mean that mine breaks a lot. But you had a great explanation. So if you could just explain the whole shortbread and short crust, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so basically what happens when you mix flour with water, you create gluten, and that's what gives things their structure. So example, when you're making bread, you're going to add liquid and like in the form of milk, water, eggs, and you're mixing it with the flour. So it's actually creating these gluten strands, which give structure to what you're baking. But when you are using things like just having butter, flour, salt, and sugar, there's no liquid going in there. So what happens is the butter coats the flour. So there's actually no gluten strands forming, a little bit of gluten forming, but not a lot. So that's why they call it short, because the gluten strands are short.
Which I never knew until today.
Did not know that.
I knew I made shortbread, but I didn't know why.
Yes. And now you know. You can tell it at your next party.
That's right.
So Grace and Mom asked, can we freeze these shortbread cookies?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So the brilliant thing about this recipe is they actually taste better as they age. So yep, pop them in the freezer, or you can keep them in an airtight container, probably for 2 weeks on your counter. But yeah, freezer is best. But yeah, they do get better as they sit.
So it sounds like there was a bit of consensus. It's hard to know when these yeses and exclamation points were coming in, but it sounds like we're going with gluten-free gingerbread next week.
Okay.
So so that's awesome. So we will make sure that by Monday afternoon, we have the ingredients and recipe needed. So if folks are looking to bake along, we will make sure that's all posted. And then as well, in terms of packaging, I know that it might be, I don't know how long gingerbread takes to prepare, but I thought it might be interesting at the end of our next session, if we can kind of give some hints on maybe fun ways to package these items as gifts, because I'll probably be stealing the ones we create in the kitchen and giving them to my family.
Okay, well, definitely, yeah, we'll think of some ideas for sure.
And Leanne is asking if we are going to be doing a gluten-free recipe, will the recipe, will it be 1-to-1, baking flour to gluten-free flour, or will the recipe sort of denote or dictate that?
I'll have it in the recipe.
Yeah. I know, like I myself, I keep a gluten-free diet. I have celiac disease, and there are different flours that have different balance. I don't know what people are using. This is, I'm kind of maybe taking this over, but this is turning into like gluten-free baking chat. But if people have good recommendations on great flours, please feel free to contribute them into the chat too, because maybe my wife who's watching can maybe bake some stuff for me at home with a great flour that you suggest. I
do like the Bob's Red Mill, the gluten-free flour, and that one is a 1-to-1. Yeah, Uncle Bob's 1-to-1. Yeah, that's what Sheena says as well. Yeah, Leanne says loves that as well. Oh, and Noon Family. So everyone is pretty on Bob's. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, awesome. We probably won't have time to ice, but we'll at least we'll do a ginger person. Oh, well, my beautiful loving wife just direct messaged me saying that you can bake your own stuff.
Well, of course you can. Excellent. You just watch Chef do it, and you've got all the skills you need now.
Yeah, I just take it away from the kitchen when I'm leaving.
I'm wondering if anyone, of the objects that I brought by, who would acquire these to, I would totally buy one of these if I get my hands on one. I don't have the skill to make it, but I'd love to have one, right? Yeah. The butter stuff might be too much work for most people. I think it's too much work for me. But I mean, would people buy these lovely tin cups if they could? Just kind of curious.
I would.
Yeah, or this little scoop. This is adorable. I would totally use this in my kitchen. Yeah, if I can get my hands on one. I know that Chef already has the sifter. I've never seen this in a store though. So this is another product that if there's some enterprising tinsmiths or entrepreneurs out there, maybe just bring this one back. Might be a good idea.
Sometimes they have them at flea markets.
Yeah, you have to get lucky and just find one, right?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for bringing in all those great things. I'm so thrilled with that mixer.
I love the idea of having a butter press as ornamental, so you don't have to go to the Grace and Mom were saying your parents have one in their living room. So it's just there as a conversation piece. Yeah, which is great, because making your own butter, it's good. Like, the butter is fantastic, but it is work and it is messy. So if you don't have to, you probably don't. But having one that you can kind of pick up and talk about, oh yes, we make butter and this is the, or we could make it. That's fun to have for sure.
Very much so. I think it's interesting baking. There's a few other trades like this, but it's almost like, the age and the roughness and the distinguishedness of something makes it more like, makes it almost like better. Even though technology can improve, it's like the oldest thing you can pass through your family that helps you maintain like that recipe or that family tradition is of substantial more value than Maybe not the KitchenAid mixer, but like a fancy food processor. I know KitchenAid mixers are kind of in their own ether of importance for bakers. But yeah, I can totally see how some of those items, regardless of how old they are, just they have so much value because it almost, I don't know, gives some uniqueness to what you're doing with your baking.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if many people, and actually that's probably how we ended up with these items that I'm talking about. Many people here on the Zoom call have at least one kind of heirloom kitchen item that they've had, forever, that maybe they got from their parents or their grandma, or they've had since they were, a kid or whatever. If I think about it, I'm sure I do.
Oh yeah, I know.
Cookie cutters in my case, I'm not sure.
I know we have a rolling pin that is important that my sister is currently the owner of because she's a chef, but it's the rolling pin for us that continues. Who knows where it began, but
we already know that Chef Laura has sifters. Is there another one that you have?
Oh, cool.
You know what I have actually? I should have brought it. I didn't even think. So I was given my my grandmother obviously did a lot of baking, but my grandfather made her when the baking powder, the double acting baking powder used to come in the tin cans instead of the nice plastic ones we get now. But what he did was he cut off the bottom, and then on the top, he glued the lid onto the actual container. And then he drilled holes in the top so that my grandma could flip it over and have the holes on the bottom, fill the can with a little bit of flour. And she used to use that for dusting. And then she'd empty out the flour, and then she'd use the open-ended part as the cutter.
Cool. I'm seeing more stuff coming in. Like it looks like Grace and Mom.
Yeah.
They just had a pretty cool knife up. I don't know what that was. And the Noon family saying that they pass on a wooden spoon that's still from the 20s. Grace and Mom, you guys have that?
That's very cool.
Where'd that knife go?
And I like that it was kind of like a hack, the thing you were talking about, Laura, right? It was like a homemade kind of solution, it sounds like. That's pretty cool.
Grace, let's see.
It's our great-grandmother's wedding knife. I didn't know when I got married, I didn't get that knife. I didn't get a knife.
Oh, love it. Is it a bone handle?
Oh, wow.
Oh, beautiful.
I bet you that's a bone handle.
Can't quite tell from here.
Oh, so nice.
It's lovely though.
Chef Laura, I can't help but notice on our cooking show, you actually had baked foods in front of you. What do we got?
Oh. So I took the liberty to bring some.
You're never inviting me back because I'm just like, oh, are we cooking? I forgot.
Oh, yes. So I'm not sure if you guys can see, but this is kind of the color that we're looking for. A nice, nice golden brown top. So mine are still cooking in the oven. But what you're looking for is this nice golden color. On the edges, it will be a little bit more browned. But yeah, so this is just what you're looking for.
Cool.
And much easier to cut when it's fully cooled down, okay? But when it's come out of the oven, that's the best time if you're going to use either a cookie press or you're going to use your fork for design. That's the best time to do that.
So you're not doing it before you bake? Like I just assumed you would do cut your little hearts into it before you bake it.
Yes, if you were to use a cookie press, then do it beforehand.
Oh, okay.
But if you're going to just use the tines of your fork, then you can either do it before or after. It doesn't really matter.
Cool.
If you were doing a rolled shortbread, so if you were to do like rounds or how Julian had the nice fluted cutter. So if you were going to roll your shortbread, just roll it, cut, and then put your tray of cookies into the fridge, let it chill, and then you would put it into the oven. So the reason for this is that you want to chill your butter in your dough so that you don't get a lot of spread. And it keeps its shape a little bit nice, a little bit better.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So how much time do we have on our baked our baking shortbread.
Let me just go have a quick peek.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. If anyone else wants to share any other tips that they have for either for next week's session or for even making shortbread, I know that one of our staff members' mother here is here. Tanya's mother is who we were told to refer to as Oma. So if Oma, I know this is your first Zoom call, but if you have tips. I'm going to assume an Italian grandmother may have some tips on baking, so please feel free to share. And we thank you so much for giving the Zoom platform a try with us for your first time. I hope that you join us in future sessions as well. Oh, cool. It looks like we are ready.
Okay. So I don't know if everyone can see, but this has nice golden edges. It's looking good. So this is the time when you would go with your fork. You could make any kind of design that you like even if you wanted to do little crosses, you could do whatever you want. Can everybody see?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to do this. It's purely decoration. Okay.
Anyone else who was cooking along or baking alongside us tonight is if you want to show you off your shortbread too, if it's done, that'd be awesome.
So just a reminder to let this sit and cool until it's completely cooled down. And then you would run your knife around the edges. Okay, and then flip it out of your pan, but not until it's completely cool. And then when you go to cut your shortbread, I find a serrated knife works the best, okay? So if you were to cut, I'll just have a little piece here. So just nice sawing back and forth motion, okay? And then you get a nice clean edge, okay? So just sawing back and forth, just gentle, okay? So then you can cut in strips, you can cut in squares. If you wanted to be adventurous, you could cut on diagonals. Endless options. How's everybody's, is everybody have theirs out of the oven yet?
It looks like so Grace and Mom have their camera on, but I think other than that, it's just me, you, and Julian who are displaying our cameras.
Okay.
So if
I have a technical question.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm gonna actually, hopefully, Chef Laura can help troubleshoot my shortbread. So I think I have an idea of why it goes wrong, but okay. Wrong is an overstatement because it's still good. I still eat it. If it tends to be short, like it crumbles on me, it could be, I mean, maybe it's a bit like, I do like it a little on the blonder side in terms of maybe not as well cooked. So I think that's probably one factor.
Yep, and that's definitely a factor. Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that I'm not letting it cool enough.
Also, when you're patting it into your pan, if it's a little bit on the too crumbly side, then mix it just a tiny bit more, just to give it a little bit more body.
So if I do like it a little less brown, mm-hmm. and I want it to hold together, is there any trick to that?
I would just mix it a little bit more before you put it into your pan.
Oh, but then might it not be a bit tougher?
No, because we're not really adding a liquid, so we're not developing.
The gluten is going to make it tough.
Mm-hmm. And some people actually, there's a lot of different recipes out there. Some people actually like to put in a portion of rice flour, and you could certainly do that if you wanted to do maybe a 1/4 cup of rice flour to, and then top of the rest off with the all-purpose flour, because rice flour does contain very small traces of gluten.
Yeah, I tend to go pretty old school and just use the historic recipe, which is, butter, flour, sugar, salt.
Yep.
That's it, right?
Totally.
So I should just bake it more.
Practice makes progress.
Bake it more and let it cool.
Yeah, let it cool down completely, and I think you'll have much more success.
Perfect.
Okay, well, Chef Laura, wow, it's 7:52. I apologize. I'm not monitoring the time. Baking is Oh, baking and speaking about history apparently makes time pass. We are nearly making history here with the longest session ever. So Chef Laura, is there anything that folks need to do beyond what they're currently doing now, which is essentially like letting it cool, ensuring that they turn it over in the way which you have explained, and then using a serrated knife to cut it safely?
Right. Nope. So once you have it cool, then you can put it in the freezer. Just again, make sure that you always label and date what you put in your freezer. But honestly, it's a great product. It will keep for a long time in your freezer. I'd say even like 2 to 3 months. But yeah, it will mature over time, the taste, and then just serve obviously at room temperature.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chef Laura, and thank you, Julian, for joining us and for allowing Oakville Museum to share some of the artifacts that you were able to display, especially for you. Having the pleasure of having you display some of the artifacts is really a privilege to us. So I think with that, we will let everyone go upon with their night. Thank you for joining us for nearly an hour. I apologize that this was one of our longer sessions, but we are so glad that you all decided to attend with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week as we make gluten-free gingerbread in such a way that we can prepare them as gifts for your loved ones, so you can provide them something lovely without having to make contact. And yeah, that would be absolutely wonderful. I'm seeing some messages. Can't wait for next week. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, guys, it's my privilege to be able to host you, Chef Laura, and look forward to seeing everyone next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for coming.